somewhat like a battle zone.
It is Monday and the TTPS joins us on now in the form of Inspector Michelle Lewis. Good morning to you, Inspector.
Good morning to you, sir. Good morning to you, ma'am. Good morning to Trinidad and Tobago. Pleasure to be here as always.
How are you this morning, Inspector?
I am good and thankful to be here, thankful to be alive.
So what are we talking this morning?
This morning we are looking at the influence of men, particularly fathers, on the society. And in the case of absenteeism fathers, how that impacts the family, society, and the country. So that is where the conversation is going this morning, and we want to share some tips as well for fathers. So there, within the organization, within policing, we looked at the data in relation to fathers and men. And when we look at the data from the Child Protection Unit, we see that a lot of sexual offenses, sexual abuse, physical abuse are perpetrated by either the biological father or the stepfather, or in some other cases by a male relative. And when we look at the data from the crime and problem analysis within the organization, we see that a lot of criminal offenses, as we know, are committed in high proportions by men. We are seeing a trend with women now, but predominantly men, and in all cases fathers. I
want to just touch on what you said. You mentioned that you were looking at the data. Do you have the actual numbers to give us? Because you keep saying a lot, and I don't know. I don't want people to get
data, but I don't want to go on the data because really I would prefer to. I do have the data, and I can share some data with you. But of course, the intention really is to let men know that we like you to change your status quo, change your perspective, and step up to the plate. But I can share some data with you. So in the case of, for example, in 2023, where stepfathers are concerned, where sexual offenses are concerned, we saw 90 cases involving sexual abuse against a child by the stepfather, 90 in 2023. 78 by the biological father in 2023. For physical abuse, we saw 118 by the biological father and 42 by the stepfather. In 2024, so far, sexual offenses by the stepfather, 51, and by the biological father, 53, right, so far. And in physical abuse by the stepfather, 29, and by the biological father, 84. So we do see the numbers in relation to the father, the biological father, as well as the stepfather and other male relatives playing a role, showing, the data is showing that they are influential in terms of negative, because when a child has been penetrated sexually or physically or sexually abused, it will impact the behavior of the child going forward for the rest of his or her life. And those children can be male or female. The data doesn't specify that it's only female. It can be male or female, and it does impact the way a child behaves when that child grows older. So when you have the male, the father, the person who's supposed to be the protector and the provider for the family and for the child in particular, and being the abuser or showing instances of violent behaviors, where we have a lot of men also involved in gang activities. And these gang activities are also shown in the presence of children. And some of these very men are fathers and also end up within the prison system as well. And then you also have the instances where a lot of fathers we have through the court system, but we call first instance warrants or maintenance warrant for fathers not taking care of their child financially speaking, right? So when we look at the data suggests that we need to speak to the fathers and to let them know that your role and your function is really, really important to the child's life, who is going to be an adult in the future. And that type of behavior that you demonstrate and you expose the child to is going to cause that child to be either a good person in society or bad person, except there are some real deep interventions, psychological, social, and otherwise, in relation to that child. Okay.
Quite a mouthful there, and something definitely to consider. Of course, we're focusing on what you would have mentioned earlier was the absenteeism, and you just gave us some numbers where it is clear that there are male figures in these children's lives, particularly. So let's go back to the absenteeism we would have discussed earlier. It's based on death, exclusion, and negligence as well, but also something I would love to learn further from the TTPS perspective is that you said you would like men to step up to the plate. But the question is, how would you like them to, given the numerous things that many men are going through in society that right now that need to be addressed?
So all of society going through, let's be fair, all of society going through, men are going through, women are going through. And it's not that it is any easier for any component of the society. It's just that we require you to take responsibility for it. So in relation to absenteeism, father, it can be in 3 categories. So the father died, so the child has no father. The father probably died through gang activity, gang violence, perhaps through a road traffic accident or some other kind of accident, or some chronic lifestyle disease. So the father is not in the child's life, right? So it may be that it may be a stepfather or somebody else. And then you have the instances of the exclusion where the father wants to be in the child's life, but the mother has excluded the child from the father's life. And so the father is now going before the court to try to get an order so that he would be able to have an influence in the child's life, which he wants to do. And so depending sometimes on the court system, it can take a while. So we recognize that there are fathers who make great effort, but there are mothers who prevent it, right? They actually prevent it. And then there are instances in relation to absenteeism where the father is negligent or delinquent. So it may be that he is negligent or delinquent because he had a child within a relationship, within the marriage, and infidelity. And so in such cases, you know, it's a child that he really don't really want to have any picture of his whole scheme of things. So he has the child, you know, separate and apart or hidden, sort of like a ghost child. So in those cases, the child doesn't really have a relationship with the father. So in all cases that we have mentioned, it will impact the child. In the case of a death, like in my case, my father died when I was 3 years old. It did impact me somewhat, but because I have bigger brothers, because I came from a family, I am from a family of 13 siblings, so the 3 bigger ones are brothers. So they were like the disciplinarians, and they filled the role well. Of course, that's some years ago, right? But for a father who has died, it is easier on the mind of a child when you know that your father have died because of whatever illness, rather than knowing that your father is there and he doesn't want to see you. It's a totally different mentality on the child. And so this morning, when we look at the aspects of what impacts a child and how we are seeing youth involved in gang activities, we know that the influence and the impact of the lack of that fatherhood in the child is affecting the society and the community at large. And so this is where, when the TTPS look at the data, we look at the proactive ways now in which the father can step up to his plate and really be there for the child. So you don't have to have much in terms of, so persons look at the fathers, look at the fact, well, you know, I don't have no set of money to be able to provide for my child as I would like to. And that is part of society. There are basic things that you can do for your child. Love is a major part of it. And telling your child that you love him or her goes a long way in the development and the self-esteem of that child, that no one else in school or in the society can come and penetrate the mind of that child to do some kind of abusive act towards that child. So that is moneyless or limitless.
Yeah, that's fathering 101. Love your child. You don't have to spend no money there
at all, right? So that is a good thing. Be a good role model towards your child. So you may be somebody who likes construction and you're good in the yard and that kind of thing. Bring your child in the yard. Show him how to do things in the yard.
Or her.
Or her in the yard, right? Exactly, because I was a good tomboy in my days. You know, and show that boy or girl how to be responsible and how to help around the home and be a productive person within the society and within the household. In the cases where the father is not in the same household, it's going to be a bit challenging
So,
but it
Inspector,
can be done.
how do we break the cycle? Because we're talking about this, right? And this is all great in theory, right? But if as a man, I haven't learned how to be a man from another man, I didn't have any positive male role models in my life, but now I am a father. How do I break that cycle of trauma?
So there are persons in your society who can be a role model or mentor to you. And the society will comprise of not just the persons who live within your neighborhood, but it will also include in your school community. You may have a male teacher. It also will include faith-based organizations, whether it's a pundit or a pastor or a priest or whoever. These persons can fill the role to a level. But the reality is there are some things that the biological father, through that, you really can't. But in the case of the father who's dead, you can't do anything about that really in a ruckus. So you have to learn to adapt, adjust, and pick from the persons who are giving you positive traits to follow.
Would you recommend therapy?
It is a recommendation, but let me not use the word but. It is a recommendation. More often than not, you see females going for therapy than men. You see females more.
So maybe that's what we should be encouraging. We should be encouraging young men and new fathers, old fathers, men who have any sort of challenge with understanding what your role might be in society. Maybe you need some professional help, and it doesn't mean that anything is wrong with you. It just means you need somebody professional to talk through it with, and get to the next side and be a better contributor to society.
There are some programs that actually have like men talk and different platforms, the barbershop and different platforms where men can chat and, you know, men to men kind of thing. That exists for that kind of dialogue.
Because, I mean, if we go based on the data that you're talking about there, I still think that based on that data, the majority of men in society are good.
Yeah.
So it's the minority that we need to fix so that we can have man-to-man conversations and be able to say, well, let me check my brethren and make sure that he's doing the right things.
Correct. And if you see one that is going off, you just
check your brethren.
But we also want the society to pay attention to the young persons who are coming up who may be susceptible to gang activities, and who we want the men like rockers to pay attention to and to guide so that they are not influenced by negative attitudes and behaviors, and that we have a turn in the society in the short, medium, and long term. Right, so we just want to encourage men in particular in the society to really be a role model towards children, both girls and boys. It helps with the girls as well as with the boys to be that person who can instill positive values into the child, make sure that you have that communication with the child, that the child feels secure speaking to you, and that your lifestyle is something that the child is looking at. And so it is important that you portray and live a particular way, because it is going to influence the character of the child in the future.
Yeah. So be careful what you're doing, and of course be careful what you're saying as well. Thank you so much, Inspector, for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having us again.
Not a problem. We take a quick break and come back with more in our morning show. Stay tuned.
Like a back in zone, but nowadays and so I am all shocked to know